This week on The Inside Story, the shakeup continues in Washington, from immigration to foreign aid, tariffs, and the world's richest person. Now, on The Inside Story, the Trump transition.
Hello and welcome to The Inside Story. I'm Elizabeth Lee in Washington. We begin today in the Senate, where President Donald Trump's picks to fill out his cabinet continue this week. Votes are being held on three of President Trump's most controversial picks: Kash Patel as head of the FBI, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to be the head of the Department of Health and Human Services, and Tulsi Gabbard to be the next Director of National Intelligence.
I feel like the luckiest man on earth right now.
Also this week, after 3 years of confinement in Russia, U.S. schoolteacher Mark Fogel was released as part of a deal between Washington and the Kremlin, the details of which remain undisclosed. Once back home, Fogel appeared at the White House alongside President Trump. The middle school teacher was arrested in 2021 after Russian authorities discovered he was carrying marijuana, which he has always maintained was to treat chronic back pain. Also this week, Jordan's King Abdullah was at the White House as President Trump threatened to cut aid to Jordan and Egypt if they refuse his demand to permanently take in most Palestinians from Gaza. White House Bureau Chief Patsy Widakuswara reports.
Palestinians in the Gaza Strip fear the return of war after Hamas's threat to delay the next planned release of Israeli hostages and U.S. President Donald Trump's call to cancel the ceasefire.
We have had enough of wars. We have begun to wish for death.
As he hosted Jordan's King Abdullah II at the White House, Trump doubled down on his plan to take over Gaza.
I think it's going to be something that's going to be magnificent for the Palestinians. They're going to be in love with it. I did very well with real estate. I can tell you about real estate. They're going to be in love with it.
The Palestinians, along with Jordan, Egypt, and various other countries, have rejected Trump's plan to forcibly relocate an estimated 1.9 million Gaza residents into neighboring countries. But other than saying he would immediately receive 2,000 children in Gaza sick with cancer and other illnesses, King Abdullah declined Trump's invitation to share his counteroffer.
I think we have to keep in mind that there is a plan from Egypt and the Arab countries. We're being invited by Mohammed bin Salman to discussions in Riyadh. I think the point is how do we make this work in a way that is good for everybody.
It's a high-stakes meeting for Abdullah, who must maintain ties with a key ally whom Jordan depends on for foreign assistance. Trump hinted he would withhold aid, but backtracked. Many Jordanians are descendants of displaced Palestinians. If Abdullah supports Trump's plans, it will create major political and economic problems and allow Hamas to enter, says Gaith Al-Omari of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy.
A return of Hamas could create not only domestic problems in terms of terror, but also there's a fear that Jordan might then become a staging ground for attacks on Israel. All of these things will create very, very severe threats to Jordan's stability and maybe even survival.
Al-Omari said Trump's takeover plan removes the incentive for Hamas to continue the ceasefire. Israel will hand over Gaza to the U.S. after the war, Trump has said.
We're not going to buy anything. We're going to have it, and we're going to keep it, and we're going to make sure that there's going to be peace, and there's not going to be any problem, and nobody's going to question it.
These Gazans would disagree. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News, Washington.
Democratic lawmakers are criticizing what they call the Trump administration's extreme efforts to reshape the U.S. government, vowing to oppose those changes despite being in the minority in both chambers of the U.S. Congress. VOA congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson reports from Washington.
A second week of protests from Democratic lawmakers concerned about President Donald Trump's attempts to reshape the U.S. government. Despite limited political capital in both chambers of the U.S. Congress, Democrats vowing to fight what they call the Trump administration's extreme efforts to close down government agencies and immediately lay off federal workers.
If you want to make cuts, then you do it through a debate in Congress, not lawlessly by just implementing them. We want waste. We want to make sure waste isn't done, but they're cutting out the meat that's going to hurt millions of American families.
Republicans have defended the work of the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, led by billionaire Elon Musk, saying attempts to stop fraud and waste are long overdue.
The Democrat Party's tantrums are exactly why they hold no majority in Congress and their candidate is not in the White House. DOGE is rightly pulling back the curtains that have been closed for years, and the outrage we are seeing across the aisle is baffling but not surprising, given their record of mismanagement of taxpayer dollars.
Democrats are vowing to fight for protections for government agencies or withhold their votes in upcoming government funding talks.
There's very little appetite to help Republicans when we don't trust that Donald Trump's going to spend the resources that we've allocated for education, for health care, or even, we don't know, for our own defense. With Elon Musk and his unelected friends running through and combing through the federal system.
Democrats have had some success temporarily stopping Trump's executive orders in the U.S. court system. But one analyst told VOA other changes will take time.
We haven't yet seen the grassroots mobilization yet, but that's the one most indirect to levers of power within Washington, D.C. It takes time for those messages to resonate with the American people, them to coordinate with each other, to gain enough volume to reach members of Congress or enough members of Congress.
But Speaker of the House Mike Johnson said Tuesday the Democratic Party has very little power.
There's no identified leader of the party. They don't have a clear vision. They seem rudderless. In hopes of finding themselves, they've latched onto this new shiny object called the rule of law. Well, we'd like to welcome them to the concept.
The short-term agreement funding the U.S. government is set to expire March 14th. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
There's a phenomenon known as birth tourism, where some foreign nationals travel to the U.S. specifically to give birth, securing citizenship for their children. Conservatives in the U.S. say birthright citizenship has been exploited. President Trump signed an executive order to end birthright citizenship for children born to parents who are in the country illegally or temporarily. That's being challenged in court. Pregnant women don't need to be on the U.S. mainland to give birth. In the U.S. territory of the Northern Mariana Islands in the Pacific, pregnant Chinese women have been fueling the birth tourism industry there so their children can get an American passport. This story comes from our VOA Mandarin service. Tourists may come to Saipan, the capital of the Northern Mariana Islands, for its Pacific island beauty, but not this mother. She's here so her daughter can acquire a piece of paper that says she's a U.S. citizen. The mother has overstayed the 14 days she's allowed to be in this U.S. territory. She only uses her surname, Ye, to protect her identity.
Whether it's the education system or the everyday environment within China, there's too much pressure. Even I want to escape. I don't want to be there.
Ye arrived in Saipan in September, entering under a 14-day visa waiver program for Chinese citizens implemented in 2019. Before that, when birth tourism from China was at its highest, Chinese nationals were allowed to stay without a visa for 45 days. Arnold Palacios is the governor of the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands.
It peaked in 2017 and 2018.
With more than 500 babies born to Chinese mothers in each of those years, Palacios says those births surpassed the number born to Saipan women. The number of Chinese births on the island dropped during the pandemic. Palacios says in 2024, 55 babies were born to Chinese mothers. Taking care of mothers who fly in just to give birth has been a challenge for the hospital staff and a risk for the women themselves, he says.
When these women come in to give birth, they don't have any prenatal records. So, they have no idea really whether it's a high-risk birth or what?
Since 2009, government records show about 3,300 babies have been born here to Chinese mothers. Ye says she found Saipan on social media while researching places to give birth.
I didn't have time to apply for a visa because it involves a wait time. The pregnancy was a surprise. I picked this place because it was the place I could get to quickly to achieve what I wanted.
Ye is applying for her 1-month-old daughter's U.S. passport. She's also paying more to have it ready within 3 weeks.
I'm afraid the policy will be impacted now that Trump is president, so I paid extra to get the passport quicker.
Conservatives in the U.S. have argued that birthright citizenship encourages illegal immigration and is being exploited.
We think we have good ground.
On his first day in office, President Donald Trump signed an executive order to end it.
We're the only country in the world that does this with birthright, as you know. And it's just absolutely ridiculous.
While this order is being challenged in court, Ye hopes there will be a good outcome for her daughter and maybe even herself.
I feel once I get here, it's a more humane place. For sure, there will be a way to solve the challenges I'm facing.
Since the end of last year, travelers from China have to apply online for a waiver and be vetted through an electronic pre-screening process before they're allowed to enter. The Trump administration also signaled plans to upend long-standing trade policies with both allies and adversaries alike. The president says he plans to impose a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports, potentially hurting America's two biggest trading partners, Canada and Mexico. Such tariffs could raise the price of those goods on the importing country, the United States. From the White House, VOA's Anita Powell has this story.
Another shot in President Donald Trump's trade war. He announced 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. This is the beginning of making America rich again.
You are the president who's standing up for the American steelworker, and I am just tremendously impressed and delighted to stand next to you.
Trump's trade advisor says this move will help domestic producers and support the nation's economic and national security. The biggest foreign steel suppliers, Canada, Brazil, Mexico, and South Korea, are likely to be hit hardest. Earlier Monday, Beijing's additional 10 to 15% tariffs on U.S. goods took effect as a countermeasure to Trump's 10% hike on Chinese goods earlier this month.
There are no winners in trade wars and tariff wars. What is needed now is not unilateral tariff increases, but equal dialogue and consultation based on mutual respect. We urge the U.S. to correct its wrong practices and stop politicizing and instrumentalizing economic and trade issues.
But Trump says not only rivals, but also allies were taking advantage of the U.S.
We were being pummeled by both friend and foe alike. Our nation requires steel and aluminum to be made in America, not in foreign lands. We need to create, in order to protect our country's future, a resurgence of U.S. manufacturing and production, the likes of which has not been seen for many decades.
Many economists believe tariffs raise consumer prices. Scholars of supply chains and logistics say Trump's move also raises major global policy questions.
It's not clear what whether this is a negotiating strategy, whether this is going to be permanent. Is this only restricted to Canada, Mexico, and China as it is now, or is it going to expand to, the European Union, for example, or even the BRICS countries, of which Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and 12 or 14 other countries are part of.
These concerns may prompt countries to realign their trade relationships, he said, which will likely alarm producers.
Businesses, again, hate uncertainty, so they're going to put everything on pause. That means, there's could be a decrease in production activity, while at the same time the tariffs could have inflationary effects.
Some in the U.S. automotive industry, headquartered in Detroit, Michigan, echoed that concern.
Sudden tariffs to a system, there isn't a lot of good that comes out of that.
U.S. trade partners have warned that the tariffs could hurt automakers, shipbuilders, and other U.S. industries. Anita Powell, VOA News, the White House.
The U.S.-Mexico tariff showdown seems on hold for now, but consumers and merchants of Mexican products say they're concerned about the financial impact if Trump moves forward with his proposed 25% tariff on Mexican imports. Victor Hugo Castillo has this story from McAllen, Texas.
Oscar Garcia is one of the 65 million retired Americans living on Social Security benefit income. As he walks through the supermarket aisles, he worries how a potential price hike on Mexican products will impact his wallet and purchasing decisions if the Trump administration's tariff threats become a reality.
What are people with low salaries going to do? If we used to eat meat twice a week, now we'll have to cut back to once a week. Or maybe we won't be able to afford it at all.
For the past 2 years, Mexico has been the United States' top trading partner, followed by Canada, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. The vibrant trading relationship is evident in the thousands of trucks crossing international bridges every day. Mario Garcia works for Mayjeff Produce in McAllen, which specializes in imports from Mexico. He says he's concerned how tariffs could disrupt his business.
Most stores and supermarkets rely on Mexican products. So what's going to happen if prices go up from Mexico all the way to the consumer? It's all a chain reaction.
President Trump has linked the use of tariffs to efforts to stop the flow of drugs and migrants crossing illegally into the U.S. On February 1st, he announced 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, but paused them temporarily 2 days later after leaders of both countries agreed to strengthen border security. While manufacturers and importers would feel the direct impact, U.S. consumers like Hilda Gonzalez believe they'll see the effects in higher prices at the checkout counter.
They're going to raise prices on products, and who's going to pay the difference? We are.
If tariffs go into effect, retirees like Garcia are afraid they will have to cut back even more on their spending. For others, it means they'll have to work harder to buy what they need. Victor Hugo Castillo, VOA News, McAllen, Texas.
Joining me now via Skype is VOA's Michelle Quinn. She has a story this week on the world's richest person who's had a starring role in the new Trump administration. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Elizabeth. President Trump tapped Elon Musk as his point person to make rapid changes at government agencies to trim federal spending. The tech billionaire and chief executive of Tesla and SpaceX has wasted no time, but congressional Democrats are pushing back.
A protest outside a federal agency in Washington focused on the work of Elon Musk, President Donald Trump's designee for shrinking the U.S. government.
The people get to decide how we defend the United States of America. The people get to decide how their taxpayer money is spent. Elon Musk does not get to decide.
Musk is the world's richest man and the chief executive of electric vehicle firm Tesla and aerospace company SpaceX. He also owns other companies, including the social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter. Since Trump's inauguration, Musk, as the leader of the newly created Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, has gotten down to work cutting what he and President Trump see as costly federal programs. We will win! We will win! Musk's team has reportedly gained access to the Treasury Department's payment systems, raising alarms, and has sought control of the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, which provides humanitarian and other aid to more than 100 countries. That's where the protests happened this week.
President Trump directed his corrupt billionaire friend, Elon Musk, to ransack a critical agency of the U.S. government.
Trump, however, reiterated his support for Musk.
It's something that he feels very strongly about, and I'm impressed because he's running, obviously, a big company.
Elon Musk said what he discovered at USAID isn't salvageable.
As we dug into USAID, it became apparent that what we have here is not an apple with a worm in it, but we have actually just a bowl of worms.
Congressional Democrats dispute that and say it is wrong that Musk has so much power and little accountability and oversight, especially given that SpaceX has contracts with the federal government. But Trump says that the White House is providing the necessary oversight to Musk's work.
Where we think there's a conflict or there's a problem, we won't let him go near it. We're trying to shrink government, and he can probably shrink it as well as anybody else, if not better.
In his unpaid role as a special government employee, Musk is permitted to work no more than 130 days a year. Elizabeth?
Thanks, Michelle. What else can you tell us about Musk's role in the federal government? Have we ever seen anything like this before?
I mean, Elon Musk is a unique person in Silicon Valley, even. I don't think the federal government's experienced anything like this. And also in Silicon Valley, he is very well known for his working style. His trademark is intensity, which has come in, really focus on a problem or an issue, and then go all out. He typically sleeps at the companies that he's trying to turn around, and he demands other people be there as well and perform at a high level. He has brought executives from many of his companies, Tesla, SpaceX, and his AI company, also a company called Boring Company, to work within the federal government, and they are throughout the federal government. He's also brought young engineers, people who've either graduated from high school or college, maybe have had some work experience, as point people inside of federal agencies.
Thank you, Michelle. While the debate continues in the United States about the future of USAID and whether the State Department might absorb it, Britain could offer lessons on what such a move might mean. Henry Ridgwell reports from London.
The battle over the future of the US Agency for International Development, or USAID, echoes a similar debate in Britain. In 2020, then Prime Minister Boris Johnson merged the Department for International Development, or DFID, with the Foreign Office.
This will unite our aid with our diplomacy and bring them together in our international effort. The Foreign Secretary will be empowered to decide which countries receive or cease to receive British aid while delivering a single UK strategy for each country.
Johnson's decision chimed with his Conservative Party's scepticism over aid spending, says analyst Tim Durrant of the Institute for Government.
Not always kind of aligned with what he thought the UK's foreign policy priorities should be. I think there was definitely a sense among those on the right of UK politics that DFID was kind of, a bit too big for its boots perhaps, or needed better oversight.
But the move shocked the aid sector, says analyst Mark Miller of ODI Global.
Because you now had a set of senior managers in place who were largely focused on supporting the UK's national interest, however you might interpret that, rather than previously a very clear mandate where aid was meant to be prioritised towards poverty reduction.
In 2020, Britain's aid spending was also cut from 0.7% of gross national income, the highest in the G7 group of developed nations, to 0.5%. Spending was redirected. The creation of Britain's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, or FCDO, offers lessons for Washington as it mulls the future of USAID, says Durrant.
In the UK instance, there was a sort of reputational hit. DFID had a very strong brand, as does USAID. There's also the kind of knock-on impact it has on morale and productivity. I think this is particularly going to be a case in the US. But there is now a sense that the FCDO is the sort of the one voice, and that there are people who have both development and diplomacy experience who are representing the UK in countries where the UK is spending development money.
Durrant added that strong oversight of spending is vital to retaining public support for foreign aid. Henry Ridgwell, VOA News, London.
That's all for now. I'm Elizabeth Lee in Washington. Check out all the latest by logging in to voanews.com and join us next week for another edition of The Inside Story. Thanks for watching.